Hello and welcome to the Robot Killer podcast. This is your host, Thomas Walsh. Today we will be exploring the topic of AI and how it will affect everyday life in America. To help all of you listeners out there, I'm going to go over a couple terms. The first term is artificial intelligence, which SkyMind.ai defines as a group of algorithms that makes decisions about data autonomously. The next term that we're going to be talking about is neural networks, which SkyMind.ai also defines as a set of algorithms modeled loosely after the human brain that are designed to recognize patterns. They interpret sensory data through a kind of machine perception, labeling, or clustering of raw data. Today joining us will be an industry expert to help explain the topic further. Mark Davis.
About 15 years ago, I was managing a data mining and AI team at a startup called Knowledge Discovery One, where we were focusing on providing data insights for large retailers like Lowe's and JCPenney's using retail transaction level data. Over the last 5 years, I started a custom chip team for Amazon AWS public cloud, and including I was one of the architects for Amazon's AI chip that's used for things like Amazon Alexa speech processing. And then over the last 6 months, I've co-founded a startup developing custom chips for autonomous driving cars, doing very high performance AI neural networks for processing video, radar, and LiDAR.
Okay, my first question for you is, what are the benefits of using AI?
AI, the way we're talking about, is kind of the development of computer systems to perform tasks that are normally require human intelligence, like visual perception, speech recognition, decision making, language processing, things like that. So artificial intelligence AI has really allowed humans to interact with computers much more naturally with pictures, video, speech, and ask far more sophisticated questions.
Okay, my second question for you is, how is AI going to be implemented into pre-existing technologies?
You have speech interfaces on your phones. You've got Hey Siri on iPhones and OK Google on Android.
Sorry, I couldn't quite hear you.
So I just said Hey Siri on my phone.
Yeah.
and so, you've got the Amazon Alexa devices. And now, you've got the smart speakers and TV remotes and phones and cars all doing speech interaction. So, I think the speech stuff is just exploding. And, think about traditional cruise control in cars. It worked exactly the same for like 20 years, right? You set a speed and the car tried to keep close to it. And then about 5 years ago, we started to see adaptive cruise control, and cars started using either radar or cameras to measure the distance between itself and the car in front of it. So it would try to maintain the speed, but it would also slow down to keep separation from the car in front of you. And now over the last couple of years, we're starting to see cars that also do lane keeping to try to stay in the lane to take over some of the steering or autonomous driving. You've got the Google Waymo division that is starting to pilot driverless rideshare cars around Phoenix. Tesla's got autopilot and the full self-driving. So, it's the autonomous driving stuff is super exciting.
That does sound very exciting. Now for a moment, I'm going to explain to the listeners our next topic. In 2016, Microsoft attempted to make an AI bot called Tay.ai. This bot was given its own Twitter profile and set out to learn from other Twitter users. Unfortunately, within 24 hours, it turned racist due to people maliciously tweeting at it to make it learn racist ideals. My next question for you is, are you familiar with Tay.ai? If so, how can AI be coded to prevent dangerous or negative outcomes?
One of the things that Microsoft ended up having to do is they had to improve their technologies related to what's called semantic filtering. So certainly, so semantic processing is basically, for natural language processing, is basically trying to understand, what the user is saying. And then semantic filtering is very much like a network firewall, right? Is once you have semantic understanding. Then it goes through a semantic filtering stage to figure out how do I stop from sending bad things into the neural networks. And so I think they are definitely working on semantic filtering for that. Another problem. So all these AI technologies have really over the last few years been using a form of neural network called deep learning. And one of the problems with neural networks in general is that they are opaque, meaning you go through you throw data at the neural network to train it, and then you throw other data into the neural network during inferencing, for it to kind of evaluate the data. But what happens is these neural networks are opaque, meaning that humans have no way to understand why it trained the way it did. And so, with a traditional program, somebody actually coded some software to do some processing, but that's not the way these neural networks work. They train opaquely, and then when you throw data in, they produce a result, but you have no way to tell why it produced that result. And so this is another problem that Microsoft and everybody else is also working on, is when you have no way to figure out why it gave you that answer, there's always a risk associated with that. Because you can't really debug anything.
Yeah.
And so this is actually one of the risks of these types of neural network technologies, is that they're totally opaque.
Are there any other risks to AI?
Yeah, so there's actually lots of risk, and you've got notable people like Stephen Hawking and Elon Musk of SpaceX and Tesla, who have been making the case that AI can be very dangerous. So one obvious risk is privacy, right? So as you get cameras everywhere, all this is going into kind of facial and people recognition. It was one of the kind of the secret agencies in the government, and they have cameras basically everywhere around DC, and they are actually putting processing, almost like every light pole has got cameras on it, and so they're actually putting processing in, so they're doing facial recognition, and then actually people identification. And so basically their idea is that if people are walking or moving anywhere around the whole Washington DC area, they actually know who you are and where you are, and they have every person tagged. So
that is terrifying.
It's kind of scary stuff, right? And
yeah.
Also the people with AI. So the other risk is everybody carries a cell phone, right? Every cell phone's got GPS in it, so everybody's leaving this, really awful digital footprint where, companies know exactly where you are at all time. They have all your purchases. They have all your web browsing. They have basically every detail of your life, and it's really kind of terrifying.
Yeah, it's super scary.
Yeah. So clearly, privacy is an enormous problem. Then we talked briefly about autonomous cars. Well, the way these autonomous cars work is that they're all cloud connected in real time. So like the Teslas actually are talking to the cloud in real time. So, but think of a case where, let's say somebody was actually able to hack into these autonomous driving networks, and they actually change the autonomous driving behavior, to force accidents. I mean, the autonomous driving stuff comes with such high risk. Militaries are developing autonomous weapons. During the last elections, people have been talking about was social media used to affect the election. But then you couple that with, AI bots and very sophisticated AI bots. You could imagine very sophisticated AI bots using social media to affect human behavior and thinking, emotion, and voting patterns. And so lots of risks there. We talked about neural networks being opaque, but a side result of that is that the way these work is that you send training data into neural networks to train them. But that also means that when a neural network is exposed to something that it hasn't seen before, the results can be unpredictable. And so think about the self-driving autonomous cars. So you've trained them against everything you can think of, but let's say that they confront some weird thing on the road or that nobody thought of to train against. The car's reaction could be unpredictable and potentially deadly. So lots and lots of risk. And then I think the final thing is, and you see this in movies, but it's actually one of Elon's biggest concerns, is that there's a term called the singularity. And so the singularity is where this kind of hypothetical future where you have this explosion in AI resulting in basically a powerful superintelligence that far surpasses all human intelligence. And so, this is clearly a hypothetical, but it's actually, it's kind of a plausibly imagined hypothetical. And it's kind of like the Terminator Skynet, right? It seems extreme, but, this is actually the sort of thing that Elon and others are actually worried about as plausible.
Due to the overwhelming negative attention Hollywood has given to AI, do you think people will ever fully trust AI?
Well, I'm not sure that they should, because what's happening is that the AI technologies and the use of AIs are advancing almost exponentially, and it's just been relatively recently that they're starting to become work on AI risk analysis and AI risk mitigation. And so, but the AI technologies and uses are advancing so rapidly, and they're far outpacing what's being done on AI risk analysis and mitigation. So, I think, for the foreseeable future, the risk will actually be increasing as opposed to decreasing on AI.
Okay, with that in mind, do you think AI is going to affect Americans positively or negatively?
I think, like most technologies, it'll be kind of mixed. I think generally pretty positively,
Okay.
but just like all technologies, for example, technologies tend to displace some jobs, right? What you'll see is AI will be able to take over more and more mundane tasks, which will displace some jobs. Well, so the people that are displaced certainly will be affected negatively, but the idea is that, hopefully those people will be able to be retrained for higher value jobs. But I think, we've talked a lot about risk. I think the risks are actually real and will continue to increase. And so, but generally, I think it should be, positive. But there's always the risk of something bad.
That is very true. That's all the questions I have for you, Mr. Davis. Thank you for your time. This brings us to the conclusion of the podcast. Today we learned that AI could both have a positive and negative effect on life for Americans. I think that a lot of the pros and cons are related, though they seem to have a trade-off of convenience to security. But that is just food for thought. Thank you for tuning in to the Robot Killer podcast. This is your host, Thomas Walsh, signing off.